Chris, we're 3 weeks till camp. 3 weeks till training camp.
We're almost there.
I know, we're almost there.
It'll be a blink of an eye, and it'll be here.
And Chris, I think this is the first time in a long time that we can be pretty confident about what the roster really is going to look like. There are a few position battles, very few, but this roster seems overall pretty set.
It's mostly set.
Let's talk about it. Let's get this sucker started.
Get dialed in, Panthers fans. Here comes an in-depth look at your team. Exclusive interviews, locker room insight. Let's huddle up for Panthers Playbook. Here are your hosts, Dennis Cox and Chris Lea.
Welcome back to another episode of Panthers Playbook. That's Chris Lea. Dennis Cox here with you. Folks, is there a player out there on the roster, Carolina Panthers roster, again, 3 weeks till training camp, that you might think be in jeopardy of getting cut, getting released? Maybe it's DJ Johnson. Maybe it's David Moore. Maybe does Hunter Renfrow get traded away? Some people are talking about, wait, what's Jalen Coker going to be missing on the roster? I think he's a lock to be on there, Chris. But you and I kind of did a little exercise. We kind of worked on it for the last couple weeks about just kind of a rough look at the Panthers roster going into this upcoming training camp. Again, 3 weeks away. And I remember actually talking to a couple of people at minicamp that it feels like that most of the roster is set, and it might really just come down to about 5 spots roughly on the roster.
Yeah.
In terms of figuring some things out. I don't know if they're really going to make a ton of outside moves to add guys, unlike we saw last season. But it feels like for the most part, there's probably about 47, 48 guys that we're pretty comfortable with making the team.
I think that they will make some moves. And as a matter of fact, the way that I have constructed my 53, there are a couple of moves that you would have to make beforehand. And I have a few if this, then that type of situations going on. So my roster is still a little fluid based off of, hey, what decision are you going to make with this position group? Okay, well, that will also impact this other position group as far as how many you'll take on. So I'm excited to talk about it and go through it and see what you think about all this.
Obviously, this is all pending guys being healthy, because we all know, unfortunately, in sports, injuries do happen. So obviously that can certainly change a lot of things. But again, on paper, assuming everyone's healthy, for the most part, going into the beginning of the season, this is kind of what we're looking at. To me, the easiest one was actually probably the offensive side of the ball. Like Bryce Young, Andy Dalton, running back, Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle, Travis Etienne. I don't have Raheem Blackshear making the team. Tight end, it's Tommy Tremble, JT Sanders, Mitchell Evans. The one caveat there I could see, depending on Tommy Tremble's back and how he's recovering from his surgery, do you keep a fourth tight end as insurance, just in case Tremble isn't ready to start the season? Because it would kind of stink for the Carolina Panthers to have just 2 tight ends on the roster going into week 1. Then, somebody rolls an ankle and, you're in a game, you're down to 1 tight end. So those are all things you have to take into consideration as well. The offensive line, the 9 guys that played last year, all come back in my eyes. But then wide receivers is kind of the tricky one for me. And I think the top guys are set. McMillan, Legette, Thielen. To me, Coker's a lock to make this team. But then it kind of gets into the Hunter Renfrow, Jimmy Horn Jr., David Moore discussion, Chris. And I know you're probably along the same lines right there.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit, because I have a few if this, then that. As I was looking at everything and I put down some initial names and I noticed there were some holes. So my initial roster has 4 running backs.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you why.
All right.
Obviously, Chuba and Rico.
For sure.
And you're not going to spend your 4th round pick on, somebody that you seem to really, really love and cut him, right? So ETN is definitely going to make it. So I also put down Raheem Blackshear because one, I felt like in other ways, depending on the way you decided to construct the rest of the roster, I think you have room for it. And because Raheem Blackshear did so much for you on special teams last year, you're not bringing him on to tote the ball behind the line of scrimmage. No. Maybe he'll get a couple of carries here and there. Maybe there's a special package from here or there. But other than that, honestly, I'm not expecting it. He's there for special teams. And so it made me think last year when the Carolina Panthers had their initial 53, it surprised all of us. They carried 7 wide receivers.
They did.
They also carried, Dennis, 10 offensive linemen.
Very true.
I think I heard you say 9.
I said 9.
And so there's room based off of all of that, depending on what you want to do for that. So I have 4 running backs, I have 9 offensive linemen. I'm sure our offensive linemen are the same. Ekwonu, Lewis, Corbett, Hunt, Moten, Nyman, Christensen, Mays, Zavala. And then here for tight ends, I feel like Trimble probably starts the season on PUP. So this is where I have tight ends for sure 3, but I have question marks on the 3rd spot, because is that going to be Trimble, or is he going to be on PUP? And do you have somebody currently on the roster that could fit that spot, or are you going to have to go shopping for that person at some point? Maybe there's a free agent out there that hasn't already signed. Maybe you can make a trade for somebody's 6th rounder that they picked up on their roster, or something that you can pick up. Or maybe you're going to look for a guy after the waiver wire, during a waiver wire situation, to bring on your roster as that 3rd spot, see how he fits in, see what happens until you can get Trimble back. But I for sure have 3 tight ends. Wide receiver is for sure if this, then that type of situation for me. So I initially have 6. And I think I was on that Renfrow train.
Mm-hmm.
I moved over for you. You convinced me. David Moore, as long as he has a great camp, as long as he doesn't like mess things up, that 6th spot is his. I think for sure you have McMillan, Legette, Thielen, Coker, Horn Jr., right? Those are the ones I think you can for sure put in there. And as Horn Jr., you're going to start developing him into that returner. So he's going to be working a lot with Raheem Blackshear and also getting some reps at wide receiver.
I think there's a little caveat real quick when it comes to Jimmy Horn Jr. dealing with that hamstring injury. How severe is that?
Yeah, that's true.
Like, is he going to be healthy in camp? So I think that's something to keep an eye on as well. By the way, I should have put a caveat there that, Chris, I actually, on the guys that I was mentioning, those are guys that I feel like are locks. I still have like 4 spots that are open. I had like 4. Yeah. I had 49 guys. I had 4 spots that are open for that 53. But go on.
So for me, wide receiver is 6 or 7 is depending on what you do for something else, for another position group. We'll get to that in just a second. But right now, with what I have here, I have 6 with the idea that it possibly could be 7, because the Panthers did start with 7 on their roster last year. And so,
again, by the way, real quick, the 7 was before the waiver claims came through. Because remember, Jalen Coker was on the initial 53.
Yes.
Waiver claims claimed, then they waived him and put him on the practice squad. So keep that in mind, folks. Be like, they didn't have that.
Just the initial 53 cut down, not necessarily what they went into week 1 with, because there's some space between that. So with room, that Hunter Renfrow could possibly still make it, because Dave Canales is a former wide receivers coach. He loves his receivers. He's already said this is the strongest group on the team. He said that last year, right? He feels that way this year, and the defensive line, of course, is pushing him for that this year as well. But unless maybe you can use Hunter Renfrow as a trade piece to get a tight end, if he is staying there throughout camp, I still think there's a slight chance he makes the roster. It just depends on what happens elsewhere. But that is my offense so far, with room for movement with tight ends and wide receiver.
I had Renfrow making it just based off what I saw in minicamp. Now, I know there's that chemistry between David Moore and Bryce, and obviously Dave Canales trusts David Moore, obviously going back to even the days in Seattle. But I had Renfrow making it.
Okay.
But I agree with you in terms of Renfrow, if he shows something well in camp and in the preseason games that a team might be hit with an injury bug at wideout, hey, let's go get that veteran guy that we know we can plug in and play right away. And like you said, hey, we've got like a 4th tight end that we're willing to move on. You guys need one, and you do a 1-for-1 swap. I'm okay with that. Okay with that. But for me, I think that final spot really comes down to Renfrow and David Moore.
Yeah, I'll explain it to you in just a bit when we get there. it does feel like, this is David Moore's to keep.
Yeah.
But also it really just depends on what they decide to do on another position group and if they decide to keep that 7. If you're looking at Jimmy Horn Jr. as more of a special teams guy in his first year, then maybe you're looking at the other 6, which will make room for Renfrow and David Moore in that case.
That 4th, 5th, 6th receiver, if you're dressing in a game, you got to play special teams.
Yep.
And we've seen Jalen Coker cover kicks as well.
Yep.
By the way, I even saw it during minicamp. He was out there working with the special teams unit. So all things you got to keep in mind. So let's transition quickly over, Chris, to the defensive side of the ball. I got 6 interior defensive linemen that I feel are locks. It's obviously Derrick Brown, it's Bobby Brown, Ashawn Robinson, Turk Wharton, Cam Jackson, their 5th-round pick from Florida. And it's the 6 spot coin flip between Shy Tuttle and Jaden Crumedy in my eyes.
I did 7. And one of the reasons why I did 7 is I looked back at last year.
For 7th.
They started with 7 last year. And the idea of, hey, we saw what happened with Derrick Brown last year. He got injured in the first game. We were really bad with stopping the run. Really bad, right?
Really bad is nice. Nice way of putting it.
Let's maybe, just in case, whether injury bug could hit Brown again or somebody else, let's at least get our core 7 together. So I went a little bit more liberal with that. And so that's why I have 7. In that case, Crumedy and Tuttle make it, simply because you have these guys, you have Brown, Tuttle, Crumedy, Robinson, already familiar with this coaching staff and what goes on here with the Carolina Panthers. So yeah, you're a part of one of the worst defensive lines ever, but also you can bring some institutional knowledge in for next year, with the idea that Brown, and Jackson and Wharton are going to probably play more than you guys.
Yeah, and I think that's also as well, is that the role for these guys, especially Shy Tuttle, his role is going to change. He's not asked to be the starting nose tackle.
Yes.
Now you're just a rotational piece that might not even dress on game days.
Yes.
There's a different role and expectation in that regard. But I can 100% see 7 interior defensive linemen making it. I think the edge rusher is pretty set in stone as well. DJ Wanham, Pat Jones, Princely Umamielen, Nick Scorton. In my 5th spot, I'm going to Mari Barno. Mari Barno is a really good special teams player. He's fast, physical, still on a rookie contract. I know he's dealt with the injuries and stuff last year, missing a big chunk of time. But to me, DJ Johnson, I don't see him making this roster at all. I just really don't. Unless Barno gets hurt and you want to keep Johnson on as potential special teamer because he's cheap on a rookie contract, I don't see him making this team.
Dennis, we're here.
We're here.
Now,
right here.
This is my if this then that, though. As you see, that's exactly what I have written down. I don't know if it comes through, but in parentheses right there, I have DJ Johnson for the Amari Barno spot, because Barno is coming off of injury. We just have to see, right?
Yeah.
But I think Barno is probably a better special teams player. He adds that depth. I feel like he has a bigger upside. He just didn't come in with the same, I don't want to say fanfare as DJ Johnson, but the Panthers traded up for DJ Johnson a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So you're going to try to make sure that this works out.
To be determined.
So that's TBD. But last year they started the season with 4 outside linebackers.
Yeah.
So if you're going to continue to have 4, and let's say Barno nor Johnson will make it, which I don't see that happening, that goes back to the wide receiver conversation for me. And then for sure, you put in 7. If you feel like everything else is taken care of on special teams and you don't need either a Barno or a Johnson, then maybe you have a room for a 7th wide receiver. So that way you have Renfrow and Moore that can make it. That's my if this, then that. Just simply based off of the numbers from last year. Last year, they came in on the initial 53, not the first game of the season, 7 wide receivers, 4 outside linebackers. But I right now have 6 wide receivers, 5 outside linebackers, with the idea that could possibly change.
I think part of the reason why they had 4 to start last season is because you had guys like Wanham and Barno that were hurt. So you knew those guys eventually were coming. So that might factor into that a little bit. And also speaking of DJ Wanham, also had the back flare up a little bit during the offseason as well. So that might necessitate keeping a fifth guy.
And you just didn't have the depth. I mean,
you didn't.
I mean, Eku Leota was on there, and that's, no shade to him, but like, like you're getting to the weeds once you start having that,
Yeah.
I mean, you have those guys starting on the roster. So
I would have been okay if Eku Leota last year was the fifth guy, but eventually like he had to be like the second guy. He was starting and playing games early on last season for the Carolina Panthers. Off-ball linebacker, to me, I've got four guys: Josie Jewell, Trevin Wallace. Those guys are locks. Christian Roseboom, whom they brought in from the LA Rams, and John Radigan as a special teamer. He was a core four special teamer guy last year. I have those four as off-ball, but I do have like a +1. Could you add somebody to that group? And I think needing depth you need depth at that position for sure, because there's not a whole lot once you get past Trevin Wallace and Josie Jewell.
We are somewhat aligned on this, but there is a slight difference for me. Jewell, Wallace, Roseboom, Sherless. The reason why, right now, Radigan, amazing on special teams.
Yeah,
I do have room for possibly a fifth, but if you have a fifth, that takes away from the DB room at some point.
Okay.
But Radigan is there for his special teams if they do 5. But right now I have 4, which means that Radigan wouldn't make it. So I have Jewell, Wallace, Roseboom, Sherless, and mainly because I don't want to throw Sherless out too much. He's for sure the last one on that list of these guys. But if you end up having the injuries that we had a lot last year, who do you trust to come into a game a little bit more? Is it Radigan or Sherless? Like not special teams. I'm talking about playing defensive snaps.
Oof. Not a whole lot of faith in either.
Sherless played a little bit more last year.
Yeah.
And maybe just like Trevin Wallace was thrown into the fire. And so maybe he just comes in a little bit better this year because of it. I think that could possibly be the case for somebody like Claudin Sherless, who's this is his 3rd year out of Alcorn State, right? So that's why I have him there over John Radigan, with the idea, though, that if they do have 5 linebackers, that takes away somebody from the DB room, and we can talk about that right now.
Okay. Speaking of DBs, I have right now 4 corners that are locks and 4 safeties that are locks, but I throw the caveat of +1 for each. Corner, J.C. Horn, Mike Jackson, Shaw Smith-Wade, probably Shamar Bartholomew, and I have a +1 in there, whether that's a Caleb Evans or someone else that they go after. And then safety, it's Merrick, Richardson, Ransom, Nick Scott, and I'll throw a +1 in there too, Chris, because after that first group, it's really, really thin.
You said Merrick, Ransom, Scott, Richardson?
Yeah, safeties at Trayvon Merrick, Damani Richardson, Lathan Ransom, and Nick Scott.
Okay, so similar situations for cornerbacks and safeties for me. You see right there, I have 5 next to both, and I have the question marks.
100% same thing.
Because I'm not sure if the 5th person is on the roster.
I agree.
Or if the 5th person they still need to go out there and get. I know that there's still some free agents out there. There's still some possibility of them signing some guys between now and training camp. Or maybe during training camp, you just want to go in there and see what you got. I want to say, as we're recording this, there's still 89 guys on the roster. So you still have, room to bring one person on without having to cut anybody else. This is also where, right, we've heard talks of, maybe some guys being able to be, a little bit versatile. So are one of the safeties, do you trust them also to play nickel in some packages?
Yeah.
Do you trust Shaw Smith-Wade to sometimes maybe come in and play a little bit of safety in some packages, depending on what it is? If you feel that way, then one of those 2 question marks can possibly go away. And whether you have 4 safeties and 5 cornerbacks or vice versa, and then that other position goes back to linebacker, to where you can bring on John Radigan, and what my plan would be. So that's what I'm looking at. It really depends on who they sign, who they can possibly get in, or who steps up and training camp. That DB room is really where somebody who you're just brought on to be a body, you can really probably play yourself onto this roster.
Yeah.
There's no other really positions where you can really play yourself onto the roster if you're just one of those extra guys, one of the undrafted free agents, or one of these other guys who may be getting your second chance because you came in from another team. It's the DB room where you can play yourself on this team if you have a good training camp.
Yeah, that's why I said, at the start of this, I was pretty confident about 48. There's probably about 5 spots out there, which was, like we just mentioned, a safety, a corner, maybe a backup linebacker, wide receiver, running back. It really is. We're talking like 5 spots, but I know, Chris, we've got to wrap things up here, but it feels like for the first time in a while that we know who the core group of this team is going to be going into the season. Again, barring any sort of injuries, but we know going in, which I think is a good thing for this Panthers team going forward, especially with all the continuity on the offensive side of the ball that we have from last year.
It's a good thing. I can also see the negative side of that too, right? Sure. While it is a really good thing, you could also say that outside of maybe wide receiver and defensive line, and I would say outside linebacker as well, maybe, the front office didn't do a good enough job to bring in people to push other people to where they would have to make harder cuts. Oh no, do I have to cut, Cade Mays or Yash Nyman, or, oh my gosh, is Nick Scott or Damani Richardson even going to make it? Or if you look on offense, wait a second, I don't know. We like Trevor Etienne or Travis, whichever one. I get him mixed up.
One of the ETNs.
We like him. We drafted him here, but man, this other running back is going to be really good. Maybe we're going to have to make a hard decision. There's not a lot of hard decisions to be made here. It's just it's just a few here and there. Like I said at the beginning, a few if this, then that type of situations. So it's a lot depending on who you bring in, what the health situation is like, who decides to play their way in the DB room. So we'll have to see.
We'll have to see in 3 weeks, Chris. We'll be down there in Charlotte. Training camp gets underway. Let's go. I'm excited for the season. It's hard to believe 3 weeks. Hard to believe 3 weeks already. I'm like, gosh, hey, about to be the 4th of July. Oh, yeah. We kick off in like 65 days or whatever it is. It's with the regular season. Wild to think about. But, Chris, I'm excited for this upcoming season. I'm looking forward to it. And we'll look forward to seeing you all next week here on Panthers Playbook.